The Gun Control Act, there hadn't really been any changes during the Obama administration that would affect the zero tolerance, but it's their interpretation of it. So they kind of have a monopoly on interpreting the rules, which doesn't seem right.
Welcome to Gun Owners of America's State of the Second podcast. I'm Kailey.
And I'm John. And today we're talking with Brandon from Silencer Central, the CEO and founder. How are you today, my friend?
Great. How about you all?
Doing wonderful. So let's start off a little bit with the backstory of the company.
Sure, absolutely. What do you want to know?
Everything and anything.
Everything and everything. So my wife is from South Dakota, and she said, hey, how about we move to South Dakota? And I said, sure. And I'd been in pharmaceuticals. I'm a pharmacist by trade, but I had worked in the pharmaceutical industry, just went to school at Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That's where Glaxo is based. So I'd done a lot of pharmaceutical industry, and I realized very quickly that there's not a whole lot of population in South Dakota to have a big, thriving business for medicine selling prescription medication. So I decided it's time to start a business, try to figure out what that was. I started shooting prairie dogs in the western part of the state of South Dakota. And what I found is that once you shoot a prairie dog, they're pretty astute. They go under. So it felt like a 5-hour drive for nothing. So I thought, well, after a little while at doing that, I thought I should get a suppressor, see how that works. Worked fabulously. Just the process was tough. This was like the early 2000s. So the process was tough. The local dealer, you could tell it wasn't really something they wanted to do. So after getting 2 from the local dealer, then I ended up getting my license to get them for myself. I liked them that much. And I realized the license is pretty expensive, and the wife's put a little pressure on me, like, you better sell a few to pay for that license that you have so you could buy toys. And so I got a license in South Dakota, and I have I've had a federal farms license in South Dakota, and now I have a federal farms license in all 42 states where suppressors are lawful. So started out here and just started working events. Had really good luck at events just because people like to hold a suppressor. Most of ours are 100% titanium. They hold it. They're like, wow, that's super light. And then we created a really good process to make it easy for the customer to go through. I'd say that's kind of our claim to fame. I know typically the females get better credibility for being more detail-oriented, but maybe it's my pharmacy degree and my MBA. I said, you know what, I think I can manage the paperwork for the customer, make it a good experience for them. And that's kind of been our mission for almost 20 years. So we started in 2005. And really the whole business model is let's make the process super simple for customers. And you'll see like pretty much every decision we've made at the business was based on that. And we feel like the largest obstacle for a customer buying a suppressor is dealing with the paperwork. So we've put it on autopilot for the customer. I mean, we even have a dialer that calls you and says, hey, you bought a silencer. We haven't gotten your signature back. We need you to do that so that we can move forward. So it's been fun. It's been exciting. Like I said, we have licensed locations in 42 states, super involved politically, both at a state level and national level because of how it impacts our business. I'm on the board for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, so that gives me a little bit of, footprint to talk to local representatives and understand things impacting at a state level, and stay pretty involved with the federal level too. I have most of my elected officials federally on speed dial and call their cell phones. They don't always answer, but they usually get back to me. So I'm trying to think what else. We're based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, even though I grew up in the Southeast. And I would say by all accounts that we're the largest dealer in the nation. The ATF gives reports. We had a call with them on Friday. It was like an ATF town hall. And I think looking at the numbers, we were about 40% of the business that they have pending applications with the ATF. So for looking at the pending ones that are waiting for approval, I think we were at 40%. So pretty big in the market. And I would say a lot of people think of us as direct consumer. So we do have a product that we manufacture, but we're also a dealer and we're also kind of the wholesaler. So we serve all three. So it's sort of a single point of contact for the customer. One thing people don't realize is we sell other people's products too. Most manufacturers, we're their number one dealer. So do a little bit of everything. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did perfectly. So you said that you hold an FFL in 42 states where suppressors are legal. So you guys, from my understanding, and we talked a little bit before the show about this, you guys are the only suppressor wholesaler, reseller that can ship the suppressor directly to your door after your form comes back. Is that correct?
Yeah, in all 42 states for sure. Yeah, we're licensed in all 42 states. There's probably other people that may do it locally, or I I don't want to say I pioneered it, but I think people give me credit for pioneering it. Basically, I had an attorney study the federal law. The interesting thing I learned about South Dakota is that there's a river that runs through the middle, and most people don't travel across it. There's like this divide, East River and West River. It's very interesting that people that live West River, they despise East River, and they won't drive over here. So I used to sell silencers at a gun show, West River, and there was only one show there a year in April. And I called my lawyer and said, "Hey, you think there's a way I could ship these silencers to the people West River, because they don't want to come all the way East River to pick their silencer up," which I get, 4.5 hour drive. And he said, "I doubt it, but let me check." And there's actually a federal statute that says if a background check does not need to be done, you don't have to meet face to face. So what I did is created a business process based on that. What's interesting is it also calls out a specific form you're supposed to use, which at the time was no longer in print. So I went to the ATF and said, "Hey, what do I do here? The statute exists for me to ship these where I don't have to meet face to face, but the form doesn't exist." So they helped me create a variance. So we had the first variance to be able to, do a process that was compliant with the law that no one had even used or talked about for a long time. And then it's just evolved over the years where I meet with the ATF and say, "Hey, I would like a variance to do everything digitally. I would like a variance to do this." And some things have gone through, some haven't. But yeah, it was hard to operationalize. And if you read that statute, there's a lot of things we have to do before we could ship it to their front door. But and I think that deters some people from doing it because it's a big burden on the dealer. But, we've been doing it for, probably 16, 17, 18 years, just that process. So we got really good at it.
So I'm going to go straight into a toughie.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, we saw an attack on the e-forms where the ATF took it down, and now it's back up again.
Yeah.
How did that affect you guys? And, we're also seeing time frames on forms coming back very quickly. So what does that process look like? And not only how did the forms going down affect you guys, but how is the time frame being sped up affecting you guys as well?
Yeah, good question. So, I really, to be honest, could never get an answer at ATF why it went down. I talked to the number 2 person at ATF, and I just emailed him and said, "Hey, so I should back up a little bit." So part of our process is, we're entering all the information into the eForms database for the customer. But the ATF wants the customer to actually review that information before we submit it. And the ATF wants the customer to actually digitally sign off on what we're submitting on their behalf, which totally makes sense. So what we do is our business model is we have a calendar and we let people have 10, we basically put in a 10-minute segment per silencer for a customer to call into us. And then we do a video call. We go through every page of the application. We go through everything and say, "Hey, is this 100% correct?" And then we let them digitally sign and submit. But how that affected us is, I've got like 30 agents upstairs that's all they do all day long. And if you can imagine, for 4 days, we have a really good relationship with ATF, but ATF is probably not as organized as you would think as a normal business would be. So essentially it went down. We had no update. It was going down. We started out with the head of the NFA branch, the National Farms branch, who manages eFarms. We emailed the director there. We didn't hear back. And so after another day, then I took it to like the number 2 person at ATF. Also reached out to NSSF. It became a, "Hey, what's going on?" And then finally they actually called me on my phone, which was nice. They said they couldn't really tell me why it went down, so I still don't know why it went down. But it was tough for us because we couldn't enter in any applications of people who had bought, and then we couldn't confirm and certify and submit for people who had already bought and were ready to get them submitted. Our system is fully automated on the digital side, so we can submit 1,000 applications an hour to the eForms website. And so basically it shut that down. But to answer your question now, so we were able to get right back on track pretty quick, get everything scheduled, get all the backlog worked through, just opened up our hours where we were open weekends, nights, gave people more time to get certifications of whatever we had in the pipeline. The approval. So we had a call with ATF on Friday. It was an ATF town hall meeting. There's about 300 dealers on there when it started. I think it ended with like 190 at the end. So there wasn't a ton of dealers, considering there's about 20,000 SOT holders in America. I was surprised how small, because they had enough where 3,000 people could call in. But what they told us is essentially they're going to start working applications real time. And real time meaning they'll do a background check. FBI does the background check for them. And then anyone that doesn't anyone that's automatically approved goes through. So let me back up again. So 70% of all people that have a background check done through the FBI NICS system, 70% of them get an instant approval. And it's hard for most customers to know that because they may live in a state where their concealed carry is NICS exempt and they don't even get a background check. But for all practical purposes, anytime a background check's done for concealed carry, or for now, I think they even let you do employees of FFLs, or, for handgun or long gun purchase, 70% of the time it goes directly to an approved. And what the ATF's trying to do now is, if it's directly approved, then the goal is to send it into approval and basically give that customer an approval. Now the trust, they're working on the trust because that's a little bit different. We use the same template for every state for our trust. So they've read our trust and, are comfortable with it. And so we're hoping that'll speed up too, that the trust will be just as quick. The problem with trust is we typically ask a consumer to put one person on the trust, being themselves, because with a stroke of a pen, you can add anyone to the trust later. But you can imagine if someone says, hey, I want to run my trust with 20 people on it through the process. If they do the background checks on those people, that's what's slowing it up, because they're having to do background checks on all those people. But we see online, people are saying they've gotten quick ones. We've seen quick ones. The other thing they committed to on Friday was they've started batch approving, like they publicly said it. We've seen them do it in the past, but the ATF has to pay FBI every time they do a background check. So batch processing basically means that if I bought a silencer, say in October, November, December, January, and February, they would approve all of them at once. So that's their new standard process, both on an individual and a trust. They approve them all at once. So once they have that background check done, get them out the door. When I first started doing this in like 2005, it was about a 2-week process, because back then they did a background check on whoever showed up to pick it up. And with a trust, there was no background check back then. So they were real quick. They would turn them around really quick. So we're excited to hear ATF sort of publicly say their goal is real time. It's hard though, because most people don't know if they're going to get real time or not. Like they consider it a delay. So that 30% of people that get delayed, that means they've probably been arrested before, or there's someone who's been arrested with the same name and a similar date of birth, and probably lives in the same state. So, if you live in Virginia and your name is, John Smith, and you try to buy a suppressor, then you're probably going to be in the 30% that they have to manually review. And manual reviewing is a little bit harder because FBI has to actually dig into it. What people don't realize is there's that 3-day statute when you buy a handgun or a long gun, where if the FBI doesn't respond within 3 days, the dealer may transfer instantly at that point. We don't have that luxury on NFA with silencers. We're trying to change that legislatively, but right now there is no mandate. So the FBI really has, as long as they need, occasionally we'll get them back that says return without action, because they can't tell if the person's prohibited or not. Maybe they were charged with a crime that would make them prohibitive, but then the courthouse has either lost the files or their paper, and they don't hear back from the courthouse as to how the actual, case ended, what they were officially, adjudicated with at the end. So I would say that quicker turnarounds has definitely increased volume. People are interested. They want to learn more. I would say our phones are ringing more. This is the time of the year it starts slowing down. Usually fall into like the first 3 months of the year, it gets really, really busy, and then it slows down as you approach summer. But we've seen it sort of pick up as far as SEO, looking at like web traffic, looking at phone calls, everything's really picked up. So it's gotten people interested who've kind of been on the fence, which is good.
So real quick, if we got a lot of people who may not understand suppressors and everything like that, can you just explain the difference between a trust and an individual with the form?
Yeah, fair enough. So at Silencer Central, our mindset, again, I've been doing it a long time. So my mindset is the trust is really the best way to buy a suppressor. And the reason why is because the silencer transfers from us, the dealer, to your trust. And we provide everyone a trust free. So it's not a money grab on our part. But once the silencer transfers to the trust, you can identify who gets it when you pass away, which is a nice positive. And you also can identify other people who can use the silencer when you're not there. So let's say you have a son who's 18 years old. After the silencer is approved to be transferred to that trust and we transfer it to you, you could add your son who's 18, and then he or she could go and use the suppressor when you're not there, because it's owned by the trust and they're on the trust as sort of a co-owner, if you will. So it's nice to be able to add friends, relatives, other people to the trust so they can use it when you're not there. But the other benefit is also that you can, pick who gets it when you pass away. So if you buy it as an individual, it's kind of finite. Once you die, then it's incumbent upon your relatives or heirs to do what they call a Form 5 to transfer it to somebody else, and that's free. The feds don't charge a $200 tax to do that. But it's the same paperwork that you do when you buy it. So it's I've gotten the calls from this the widows. It's too difficult for someone to figure out. So I know people are going to lean to want to do individual because they sound like it's going through the ATF system quicker. But my challenge still is that trust really is the best way. So if it adds a couple extra weeks, to me, it's worth it. Just because then you're in the driver's seat as far as allowing other people to use it and also picking someone else to get it when you pass away.
Yeah, so you've talked a lot about being active. Obviously, GOA is incredibly active on the advocacy side of things at the federal and state level. What is your kind of roadmap for getting involved, and what do you want to say and encourage others to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the hard part is since I'm licensed in 42 states, I feel like I'm always reactive, which is not where you want to be because it's kind of hard to walk it back afterwards. But boy, I would encourage people to stay involved. I mean, especially if you're in a state. I mean, watch state issues because they can create bigger issues. Federally is obviously tougher, but yeah, I would say people have to stay involved. You have to talk to candidates. I mean, people always ask me, do I think silencers will ever come off the NFA list to be easier to buy like a regular firearm? I think it will as long as people stay involved because there's so many elected officials out there that they hear the word silencer and of course they think of movies, they think of, serial killers, whatever. So the only way we can overcome that is going to be able to educate our politicians. And that means some responsibility on our part to go to events where they're at, try to find ways to talk to them, sort of educate them so that they want to learn more. And I've tried to get most of them as customers as far as our elected officials too, just to kind of let them go through the process and see what they have to deal with so they can sort of feel that pain, if you will. I can't overemphasize the importance of staying involved because even look at like the number of people who vote. I mean, I think, 30% of registered voters actually go out and vote? I mean, it's sad. And I know that looking especially at the sportsman side, the hunting side, I think it's worse than that. So it's kind of disappointing that people aren't even voting and not getting involved. You're basically letting the left tell you what you can and cannot do, which is not where we want to be.
No, it's so important that people kind of get off the couch, right? You're doing laps around everyone that stays home just by being active and paying attention. Apathy is, I think, one of the most dangerous things that can happen with the Second Amendment. And so it's so important that every person that loves the Second Amendment stays active and involved. And it doesn't matter if you feel like, well, my rights aren't being attacked as much because, I only use, my firearms for hunting, or, well, I only have it for home defense, or whatever is what you consider that safe lane. It's 2024 and it's time to understand that the anti-gun left is not going to allow any lane to be safe. And so we have to be active. We have to be involved, and we can't afford to have any sort of apathy when it comes to protecting our rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary because even if you look at, I think it was Washington State, I think the governor's going to sign a bill for the FFLs where you basically have to have steel doors and steel gates. And I mean, it just drives up the cost for dealers. And it's just a gradual way for them to continue to make it harder for us to do business. I mean, I've had trouble with banks where they won't do business with me because I'm in the firearms business. They see it as a reputational risk. So, it could create headaches getting involved and being vocal, but you got to do it. And I think that there's plenty of people out there that respect other people who actually do it. It's just, hey, how do we get more people involved and see? Because what you see happen in some of these other states that you think will never come to my state, it's sort of their playbook to see how it works, so then they can take it, nationally on a federal level.
No, I mean, I completely agree. One of the things that it's so frustrating is when you're looking at a landscape and maybe you are in a blue state where everything seems to be going against you, what you might need to remember and refresh yourself on is how long has the state been in that condition? It's a progressive takeover, right? And so you have to be proactive in order to start changing those tides, taking people to the range, showing them podcasts, having conversation with them, meeting people where they're at. changes their mind. It might be one person at a time, but the greatest, and any marketer will tell you this, the greatest thing that you can do for any cause, whether you want somebody to buy shampoo or, eat better, whatever it is, word of mouth advertising is the best form of advertising. And that's where activism starts.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that.
Yeah. And you brought up Washington. I know that Gun Owners of California, which is our sister organization, is also fighting the same thing in California, where they want to do cameras and a bunch of other stuff, would just cause the FFLs to lose so much money. And we need to fight on that level as well. I do have a question. You said talking about to politicians and teaching them. Do you guys have resources on your website, or are you guys planning to do resources on your website to help teach people how to talk to their politician about suppressor laws and how to get them changed?
No, that's a good idea. I mean, I don't think we have anything now, but I do think that's a good idea. Because when I talk to elected officials, so NSSF, National Shooting Sports Foundation, they'll ask the CEOs to come in to Washington and actually lobby with them. And my experience is the elected officials are getting a lot of feedback on suppressor wait times. And yeah, I agree. There's probably some opportunities for us to provide more information for them. I know that the American Suppressor Association has some good flyers, and we've used those too with educating elected officials that it's not truly silent, and showing that most people that buy these things are typically well-to-do folks that are obviously only using them for lawful purposes. So there's definitely an opportunity there.
So I kind of want to jump back to some of the things that you said at the very beginning, and that is how you became a suppressor owner was all about hunting. Hunting, like you said before, it tends to be that group that shows a lot of apathy when it comes to voting. We are working to get suppressors legal for hunting purposes in all 50 states. It's something that our organization, Second Amendment Hunters, is working on constantly. What is kind of your take on what are the best ways for hunters to fall in love with suppressor hunting, to kind of get out there and maybe make a switch in the equipment that they choose to use?
Yeah, it's a good question. So usually when someone asks me about sort of the benefits of hunting with a suppressor, I always say, of all the people I've ever met, I've never met anyone that hunted with a suppressor who didn't say, I'll never hunt again without one. So I feel like that kind of almost like speaks for itself. So there's numerous benefits. So right now, the silencers are legal in 42 states. There's only one state where you can't hunt in them. It's Connecticut. So, but the other states, almost like a lot of issues, it's just education. Once they understand that it's not silent, and there's some benefits also for, accuracy and, recoil reduction for people that are more recoil sensitive, whether they're disabled or children. There's so many benefits. Also, just the obvious, the hearing protection. You're seeing more and more law enforcement agencies going to requiring suppressors just because they're getting so many disability and people retiring early because of shooting indoors, where it intensifies the sound even worse. But I think a lot of it is just education. Once they see that it doesn't really give you a huge advantage in game hunting, it's not like you're going to shoot more game because you have a suppressor. And anytime you see a crime done with a suppressor, whether it be hunting or non-hunting, it's always one they made themselves. They didn't actually go through the process. So it's always good to make that clarification, because I always say I think I've read one article in the last 20 years where someone actually used a suppressor they lawfully owned. All the others were, they bought something and made it, and it's going to be hard to stop that anyway.
We just saw you guys at Pheasant Fest, which is a totally different crowd that I'm used to going and seeing.
I bet.
So what is kind of like the feedback from people when you go to an event where it's mainly focused around hunting? What does that look like? Because you guys kind of stood out from the crowd as kind of like this different company compared to the sea of mostly outdoorsy, a lot of hunting dog stuff, things like that.
Yeah, no, good question. We started events. We started at gun shows initially, so that's all we worked were the gun shows. They called it the Dakota Territory, so gun shows in North Dakota and South Dakota. And what we found is most of the people in the Dakotas are also hunters. So they may be ranchers or target shooters, but they're also probably hunting too. So most people are probably familiar with us at those events and probably, recognize the name from billboards in town over the years. What I find is pretty much anyone that shoots a firearm, if you ask them would they like to reduce recoil and also not have to wear hearing protection, 100% of them raise their hand and say yes. And then what you'll say is, well, then what's holding you back from getting a suppressor? And they'll just say, well, it takes so long in the paperwork. And we say, well, how about we let you pay while you wait with no interest or fees? We'll do all the paperwork right here at the show. We'll take your fingerprints. We'll take your photo. We'll do your free gun trust. And then remind them that we let them pay while they wait. So you put $200 down a day if you want, and then we just ship it to your front door. We call it easy pay, but what I found it shows is most guys would say, my wife will kill me if I spend this much money and come home with nothing. So that's why I said, well, how much do you have in your pocket? How about you put some down today and just pay while you wait and just make sure you pay it off before we ship it to you. And a lot of people like that. It's sort of a nice option. But the benefit really at the event is, I always say everybody wants one. It's just the process. And we say, hey, give us like 12 minutes. We can do all the process right here for you. We have staff hired to do it. That's attractive to folks. They're like, yeah, okay, I'm in. I'm interested.
So you guys do, speaking of that, you said you do a ton of events. What are some of the weird myths and things that people have brought up to you over the years while you're at these events that you got to go, hey, that's not right, or that's not true, or...
So one I used to hear a lot, well, when I first started doing this, everybody thought they were illegal. Now, they were illegal in Iowa and Minnesota when I first started. That's been resolved. So I could see people, because we're kind of close to the Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska border. But so a lot of people think they're illegal. A lot of people think you can't hunt with them. A lot of people think they're illegal in their state. So, I mean, they're legal in Maryland. And sometimes when you work shows in the Northeast, they just assume because they're kind of a blue state, they're probably illegal there. But it's not the case in most cases. The other thing is people are afraid you lose your Fifth Amendment, where like search and seizure. They're like, oh, if you own one of those, someone could go through your house. And, ATF's clarified that unless you're involved in criminal activity, they're not coming into your house to go through your stuff. So I think some people are worried. They were worried about that if you have a silencer. I think some people are like worried that, well, if you become on a list. And I always tell them, well, if you pay taxes, you're on a list. So, don't worry about the silencers. My honest perception from working with ATF is their goal or role is to enforce what Congress told them to do. And I don't perceive them seeing silencers as a public safety risk. And since they don't see it as a public safety risk, I don't want to say they turn a blind eye, but they're not as aggressive or assertive. I mean, if I called them and told them I lost a handgun, it's going to create a return call and they're going to want to know what happened. Where if I tell them I lost a suppressor, it's kind of like, thanks for the paperwork. There's not as much, sense of urgency. So that's what I tell people, to try to get there, be a little bit calmer about it. That, since suppressors, silencers aren't a public safety issue, you just don't see ATF all over people about it or in regard to it. So I think some people are just worried about that. Like they're on a list. People are going to come check them, going to come see them. One thing I do remind people is that Form 4, the paperwork we do to transfer the silencer from us to the consumer, is actually a tax form. So technically the only people that could see that would be like a treasury agent and an ATF sort of on the criminal side. So there's very few people that can ask to see that. That's why you'll never see a list by ATF. Like ATF has a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request on their website where they have every licensed dealer in the entire country. You just download it and have all their information. But you'll notice they never have the silencer dealers because it's already tax law. And, it's publicly, it's private. It's not public information. So a lot of people are, they're worried they're going to be on a list, and that's not the case. I'm trying to think if there's any others. I think that's, some people I think some video games slow down the bullet. So a lot of people that are younger have this perception it's going to slow down. It actually speeds up velocity. It's almost having a longer barrel on there, the gas pushing on its way out. So I'd say that's the major sort of misconceptions. And it's hard to tell people that if they got it in their head that it's something else.
You mentioned something about ATF not seeing these as kind of a higher crisis or kind of I can't remember exactly how you
public safety. Yeah.
Public safety.
Yeah. They don't see it as a public safety issue.
If they don't see it as a public safety issue, what is stopping them from removing suppressors from the NFA?
Yeah, good question. So, if you ask them, they would say we enforce whatever Congress tells us to do. So there was a memo leaked by a former ATF head when right before Trump started, and they basically said we would entertain and be interested in deregulating these because we don't see it as a public safety issue. So I don't know that that person was speaking on behalf of ATF, but kind of, if they were the head of ATF, they wanted to have a conversation because they don't like the pressure of having to approve these and timelines, and they're tired of the congressional scrutiny. And I can just tell they're ready to be done with all that because they don't get any of that tax money. None of it goes to ATF. So I think if it were up to them, they would deregulate them and treat them the same as like a handgun or a long gun. And what they would say is, we just enforce whatever's in the federal statute based on whatever Congress tells us to do. Go talk to your congressman would probably be what they would say, which is sort of a cop out. But I guess in reality, that's the best we could do at this point.
So I do want to kind of mention this. So you have FFLs in 42 states.
Yep.
And so obviously with having that kind of reach across the US, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of things to keep up with. Zero tolerance policies that have been enacted under the Biden administration have been devastating to the Second Amendment community. Is there any pressure that you feel from maintaining all of those FFLs?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's people ask me what keeps me up at night. It's definitely that. Because the hard part is, when I started out as an FFL, I did everything. But to now have, 42 W-2 employees in all these states doing that paperwork for me, it does make me nervous. We're 100% digital, so we have some transparency so we can see what's going on here from the mothership to other locations to sort of audit. So we audit everything. But yeah, it does worry me. I mean, I think one benefit that we have that's an advantage to us is most of the zero tolerance stuff, because I've read all of they even posted out on the web, all the sort of as a FOIA request, they posted everyone who's had a violation and how it ended. And, you can go through and read every FFL has been reviewed and how it ended, which kind of seems like a privacy thing. But just having read through all of those, what I found is most of them are background check related. And so we're sort of fortunate in that the background check is done by the FBI before they send us the approval. So I don't want to say there's no way we could screw up, but it's a little bit harder for us to screw up because the background check's already done before they send the approval to us. We've had, like, at our main location, I think one time for some reason one of my employees did a background check on someone that was 3 days away from being 21, and they were picking up a lower receiver, so that created an issue. It was before we had software in place, so that's kind of a bad violation by ATF. So I think we had a situation too where someone brought in a barreled action and the serial number was Cerakoted over it, so it was hard to read, and that could be perceived as an obliterated serial number because it was tough to read. Even though we had the right serial number in the books, it was hard. I could see them saying. So we've had some issues we've had to work through with our main location here in South Dakota. But what we did is we just stopped doing like local transfers, just focused solely on NFA. But no, it does scare me because I think a lot of it is open to interpretation. My experience with ATF, and this is just my experience, typically a blue state has blue employees, and blue employees are harder on gun owners, has been my experience. Whereas red states, typically, I've seen red employees that typically aren't as rough on the FFLs. So it's sort of a mixed bag. Like, I get nervous when I get a call from Washington State or Oregon or Maryland, and they say ATF's here for a surprise inspection. I'm always like, okay. The honest truth is our business model is so unique that when I got my licenses approved in every state, the ATF asked me to go physically meet with their people there to make sure they understood our business model, which I was happy to do. But what I find is, when they do go through and inspect us later, the person maybe is not there that did our initial interview. So I'm having to talk about our business and how it works and how we're in compliance with federal and state law. But, the zero tolerance does scare me. Reason number 2,000,001 why we need a Republican in the presidency, because that's where the Attorney General is getting direction from, who then trickles down to his employees at ATF. It's all open to their interpretation. Oddly enough, I would say I did hear pushback from ATF people that I would call maybe they're there their whole life, the lifers or whatever. They were having pushback against the administration for making them enforce stuff that maybe they didn't necessarily agree with. I don't know maybe that was just the easy answer to tell me because, they know I'm the dealer, but I sent some of the things they were a little, because it's hard. Like, I had a friend call me and said, hey, I might lose my license. He had done a background check on a truck driver and it came back delayed, and the truck driver came back on day 31. And anytime it's over 30 days old, you have to do another background check. So basically, the guy showed up, he did a background check, it was delayed. The trucker comes back day 31, and he gives him the firearm. Well, it's over 30 days, and he had not done an additional background check. So he could lose his license for not having done the background check. So it's tough. I think the take home for me when I had problems with ATF was go 100% digital and have a digital platform where everything's managed for you and it'll catch anything that goes wrong. So it sort of takes any kind of, training issues away from the employees so that they have to follow and the ATF told me that too. And it sort of fixed situations we had. But no, it does scare me because the Gun Control Act, there hadn't really been any changes during the Obama administration that would affect the zero tolerance, but it's their interpretation of it. So they kind of have a monopoly on interpreting the rules, which doesn't seem right.
No, it definitely doesn't. And we have enjoyed suing them on many of those cases.
Oh, we appreciate you doing that.
Just because, it is any time that you have a bureaucracy that can become a political rogue agent for an administration is a terrifying a terrifying situation for the citizenry, right? Where the Second Amendment, our constitutionally protected right, can be open for interpretation. We saw that, with the pistol brace ban and with the bump stock ban and people turning into felons overnight. Many of them probably didn't realize that they were going to be turned into felons overnight. And so it has massive repercussions, and it is GOA's and GOF's pleasure to sue on as many of those cases as we can, right?
That's good.
So you brought up you guys have a digital system, and it's kind of a two-part question, and you can answer it if you want. But having a digital system, a lot of people have fear about having their stuff digitized and things like that. How do you combat that fear? How do you keep your customers' data safe? Because people are going to ask that question.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So, our IT team, we're probably spending $1 million a year just for security to make sure that we have the security in place because we use a cloud-based application. So then just making sure it's secure. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we spend a lot of money on it. It's funny because I'll talk to my insurance guy and he'll say, hey, you got $100 million worth of silencers out here waiting for the feds to approve. And we're going to charge you, $400,000 or $500,000 to insure those while they sit there. But probably your biggest risk as an organization is really your IT and your infrastructure around digital. So it gave me a good perspective of, you might pay, $4,000 or $5,000 for cyber security insurance and, several $100,000 for your actual product. But really you need to think of it the other way. So we've really focused on how can we spend more money to protect people's data. We don't give access to anyone, so it's all just in our closed system, and it's set up where only our employees can access it here. So the IP addresses are set up where they have to physically be here. It's been an ongoing struggle to make sure that we're protected, but we have firewalls and all type of things that we pay for to make sure it's protected. It's tough. I mean, I always tell people that we're spending as much money as we can to make sure it's protected. So we're not kind of like a, sort of a mom and pop or anything like that. And I know other big organizations have been broken into. I think the reason why we take it so seriously is think about how much information we have. I mean, we have social security number, we have people's fingerprints, we've got their date of birth, we got where they were born, we have everything that the FBI needs to do a background check on someone. So it's so incumbent upon us to make sure that, when we leave a laptop after we, if we're going to go to the restroom, make sure you log out. So, I mean, we have the same kind of protocols. A lot of our employees here came from healthcare. And so we kind of have a lot of the protocols that you would see in a hospital or any other kind of organization where privacy with HIPAA, having that same mindset here. But it's a daily task to, pay people and make sure that your information is protected. And the most important thing I would say is it's a heavy investment for us. We're spending a lot of money there to make sure it's secure. And just, we always ask people to trust us that we're professional and our goal is going to make sure, because that would be a huge hit for us if information was compromised.
Yeah, and I know people, especially, in our space, that appreciate when companies are willing to say, we're doing everything in our power to be proactive in the protection of your information. Because that's definitely not a situation where you want to be on the reactive side of
No,
things.
totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, it creates some customer struggles too, because a customer might call and say, "Hey, I want to do a pistol brace, and can you mail me my fingerprint cards?" We're always like, that's tough for us because if you don't get them or they go to a different address, it's got all your information on there. It's got where you're born, social security number, your fingerprints. So it creates struggles for us on, hey, what's the best way to make sure we're taking care of our customer, but also make sure we're not sending them something that could, create some kind of issue for them on identity theft and things like that.
No, and that's a huge thing to have to combat, and that's why I asked the question. So,
No, it's good, Gresh.
a lot of people in our space are very anti technology and things like that. So it's or well, at least in the gun community.
Like you said, you are on the manufacturing side of things as well as the dealer side of things.
Yeah.
When it comes to the manufacturing side, kind of walk us through the process of what makes your product unique, what makes it, in your opinion, probably the best. But give the people what they want as far as the product details.
So I should back up and tell you why I got into manufacturing. So the reality was a couple things. One, when I first started doing this, customers would come up to my booth, they would look at the product and they would pick it up and they would say, "Gosh, this is heavy. This looks very tactical. This looks more like maybe someone who used to be in the military is using this on the weekends." And what they were wanting is something that looked more for like a hunter. And so that was one thing that made me think, okay, maybe it's a different market for the hunter and the tactical shooter. And then the next thing was almost 90% of my sales when I first started were from like, say, January till April, because that's when all the gun shows were. All the gun shows, just because of the agricultural base here, people would go to gun shows, and that's when they were scheduled in the winter when there was nothing else to do. And I needed all my inventory during that period of time. So there's really, at that point, there was not that many people who were willing to supply me with that much product for those 3 or 4 months and could get it to me in a timely manner. So it sort of forced me to say, hey, I got to go find a manufacturer that can make for me. So going back to the hunting, what I found with hunters is they want it really, really quiet. Whereas if you look at a tactical shooter, their goal is typically for it to be hearing safe. But the hunter is like, man, the quieter it is, the better it is for me. So I want it super, super quiet. They don't care if it's a little bit longer, but they also want it really, really light. So what you'll find is most of our suppressors are 100% titanium. So we buy so much titanium, and we typically buy 2 years at a time, that we can pay for what normally people would pay for almost stainless steel because we buy so much titanium. It's very tough to machine titanium, so we struggled to find manufacturers that had experience there or willing to sort of jump in with us. But we basically made a line of suppressors that were sort of tailored to the hunter, where it's lightweight, it's super quiet. You'll see a lot of our suppressors come apart to clean as well. When I first started, the rim fires did not come apart. And then the first evolution was rim fires came apart to clean, which makes sense because you could get some lead buildup because that bullet's not jacketed. But then you don't see many other larger suppressors come apart to clean. And I find probably 30 to 40% of people want to be able to take it apart. They want to clean it. They want to make sure it's not filling up and losing its volume and getting louder. So really pretty much everything we make comes apart to clean as well. But I think the titanium, just because it's stronger, is sort of giving us an advantage. It's funny, when I first started, a lot of people thought, this guy's doing titanium, that'll never work. And now I see a lot of people are coming out with titanium suppressors just because there's a demand for that. And I know that sounds like a hunter specific, but if you take a regular tactical shooter and you tell them you're going to give them a lighter suppressor, it's also quiet, they're not going to complain. So it ends up, we kind of made something for hunters, but it's worked out really well for tactical. But like I said, we sell everyone's product. So if someone sees a product on our website or even not on our website, just call us, because we have really good relationships with manufacturers. Most of the ones on our websites are ones that we buy direct, so we don't have to go through a wholesaler. So we have a little bit better control of the inventory we're getting. But if there's something they don't see on our website they want, one thing they have to do is call us, because usually we can get it through a wholesaler and go through the same process where we let them pay while they wait and give them a free trust and then ship it to their front door.
All right. Here's the hardest question of the day.
Okay.
Best can on the market. Go.
I tell you, I am 100% obsessed with the Banished Backcountry, just because it's 5.5 inches long and it's 7.8 ounces. It's super, super light. Every show I work, when I hand it to someone, it's hard for them to say no, I don't want one. And of course, I typically use it for hunting applications, so it's a little bit fatter, but it's hearing safe on a Remington Ultramax. So I mean that one's very solid for the hunting perspective, where people want it light, short, and quiet. That's mostly what I do. I do shoot some machine guns. I do have this. You know, just over the years working gun shows, people would come up and say, "Hey, I've got a machine gun that I'm getting a little older. My wife's not going to know what to do with." So, I think I'm up to about 200 or 300 machine guns. So I do have an addiction problem there. That it's a good thing I'm friends with the federal ammo guys, so that I can afford to feed those. But even a pistol can, like we have a Banish 45, which is nice too for using on full auto and on pistols. But again, I'm sort of biased towards titanium, lightweight, and durability, but definitely I like the Banish 30 for its ability to be quiet, not be that long, and also very lightweight.
I told you that was the hardest question of the day.
Oh yeah,
Because there's so many great Now, did you guys go up to that event? Now I can't remember, where they tested all the suppressors against each other.
I don't know if we got an invite to that or not. I don't know. Was that AAC that helped put that together?
I think it was AAC who put that together. Or either it was AAC. I know Huxworks was there and Dead Air was there, and I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, we go to CanCon and things like that. Sometimes I tell my team, like, unless it's a consumer event, sometimes we don't go, just because you wonder, like, even if there was because like I never saw any information after that. So that was my concern. Do we spend a lot of money and go up there and shoot and test and then not really have anything to show for it afterwards? But no, I do think we should probably go to more of those. I mean, we have a can we came out with recently. It's called a Speed K. We made it for Federal Ammunition. Federal Ammunition came to us and said, "Hey, we see law enforcement market increasing in their suppressor use. Federal has great market share with their ammunition with law enforcement agencies, and they wanted something else to be able to sell to those agencies that they saw was a growing market." So we spent about 2.5 years in design with them, and we came up with a 3D printed. We call it, our internal code for it's a 2x4. So it's 4 inches long and it's 2-inch diameter. So the law enforcement like it because they can clear rooms real quickly. I know my team showed me some videos this weekend. I've got a saw, like an FN saw, and they used it on that. They loved it. That was the best running thing. So of course I don't have any, I hadn't spent the money to get the belt fed part. They just put the AR-15 mag in the side, but I could tell showing the videos, they're like, "Oh man, this is awesome. We got to scale this up." People love it. But our Speed K is 100% Inconel. So it's a little bit stronger material so they can handle full auto. And it's probably, rated for law enforcement that use burst and also full auto, but also the military side as well.
All right. Well, we've taken up enough of your time for today. We appreciate you being on with us. Go ahead and plug away, socials, website, where you want people to go, what they want them to do, all that.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, I'd say if you've ever been on the fence about getting a suppressor, it's really the best time because the ATF approval times, their goal is to be real time. And that's kind of what we're seeing, a lot of approvals. So, you could just do a Google search for Silencer Central, go to our website, call us. We have the same number of 5-star reviews for people that bought online or talk to our people, but I'm probably biased to talk to our people just because, one thing about misconceptions you were asking about earlier, a lot of people think that if you buy a suppressor, you can only use it on one gun. And they don't think about the multi-caliber functionality where you can buy a 30 cal and use it on a 223 as well and anything in between. So I would recommend they call, visit. You see us at an event, stop by. We could do all your paperwork there. But we'd be happy to work with people and show them how convenient it is. We've really spent almost 20 years focusing how do we make the process easier and very customer focused instead of dealer focused, and to just ship it right to your front door when the feds approve it.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much for thinking of us.
Well, we, again, like Kailey said, appreciate you coming on. Guys, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a 5-star review on all podcasting apps. Make sure to subscribe to the new State of the Second podcast YouTube channel and hit the little bell for notifications. And have a great rest of your day.